Matthew 6 and 25 and through 34. It's a few verses, but I feel the need to read all of them. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment? Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, neither gather in barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? Which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit unto his stature? And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. As we're seated, I'd like to ask Pastor to pray over this message.
Lord, we give you glory, honor, and praise. I ask you, Lord, to anoint our minds that we might hear your word, and our hearts that we might do it. I pray, let your word go forth, and let us be changed by it. We give you glory and honor in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen, and you may be seated. Excuse my bad jokes, but tonight, Toto, we will not be in Kansas anymore. I want to take us all on a journey back in time around 3,000 years ago. We will be joining the people of Israel right when Moses has shown up to Pharaoh and he said, let my people go. While we're here, we begin to see God send several plagues to Egypt. He begins to show the people of Egypt and the people of Israel just what he's capable of. Water turned to blood, a plague of frogs, then lice, then flies. It would have probably been better to have the flies and then the frogs to clean up the flies. But the frogs, then the lice, then the flies. Then the Egyptian livestock are messed with. Then the Egyptians get boils. It hails in hot Egypt. Locusts show up. It's dark in the middle of the day for 3 days. And finally, the firstborn of every family that does not have the sacrificial blood on their door is killed. After this, we, joining the people of Israel, not Egypt, of Israel, we're heading triumphantly out of Egypt. We're headed to this so-called promised land that Moses keeps talking about, and we get excited and caught up in the buzz with everything that's going on, and we get on our way, and we travel just a little bit, and suddenly we're caught between a literal rock and a hard place. There's a Red Sea on one side, and there's the army of the Egyptians and Pharaoh on the other side. We begin to worry about what could happen, but a few of us remember the 10 plagues in Egypt and trust God. Around this time that the Egyptians are getting closer, suddenly God begins to part the waters. The Red Sea waters part so far that it is believed, due to the size of Israel, that you could not see, if you were in the middle of the people of Israel, you could not see the waves as far as you could look left and as far as you could look right, because they were that spread out. You walk through this, you get to the other side, and then you realize Egypt's right behind you. Suddenly, though, the waters crash, defeating your enemy. God takes care of you and his promised people. And not only that, he's now leading you in a pillar of clouds by day and a pillar of lightning by night, so that you can travel by day and by night. And not only that, so that you know he is always there. All you have to do is look up, and God's right there. You can see him leading the way. Moses may be the man leading, but God's the one leading everyone. You don't have to trust in a man. You know that God, the one who brought you out of Egypt, cast the plagues, crashed the Red Sea waters on the Egyptians, you know that he's leading you. Excited from the victory over Egypt, the men begin to sing songs. Moses leads them. And something that I think we should bring back, the prophet Miriam, along with all the women, start playing tambourines and dancing before the Lord. Olivia can lead us. Unfortunately, though, this parade doesn't last too long because all that singing and dancing gets the people a little tired. And when you get tired, you start to get thirsty. And when they're worked into a thirst, the people of Israel aren't quite as excited. Exodus 15 and 22 through 25 talks about and says that they traveled for 3 days in the desert and found no water. When they came to Marah, they couldn't drink the water because it was bitter. That's why it was called Marah. The people complained against Moses. They complained against God's chosen prophet, the one that he appointed to lead them. And they said, "What will we drink?" Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord pointed out a tree to him. The story goes on. He cast it into the water, and the water became sweet and more easily drinkable to the people. And God said that he will use this as a test, that if the Israelites will follow him and keep his commandments, that he will not cast on them the sicknesses and the diseases of the people of Egypt. He says, "I am the Lord who heals you," and that he will take care of them. He will take care of us if we keep his commandments and we stay in his will. The Israelites in a very short time went from praising God, dancing, playing music, doing everything that they could to thank the Lord, to complaining. It didn't take very long on the journey. It's easy to read the story and cast judgment, but can we be any better? Who in this place, after a good Sunday service or a good Wednesday service, the next day comes around and you taste some bitter water? The next day comes around and things aren't so easy and things aren't so straightforward and simple like they were at church. Things begin to get a little bitter, and it's not as easy to take down the things that are coming at you. It's so easy to forget yesterday's victory when we're facing the bitter water of today. Lord, I know I'm in your will because you put me here. You put me at this puddle of bitter water, but why is it bitter? If you put me here and I'm in your will, aren't good things supposed to happen to me? Could it be that bitter water is helping shape us into the men and women that God needs us to be? I feel that sometimes God just wants to see how we react, not to the mountains, not to the valleys. He just wants to see how we react to the small things on the journey there. How are you reacting to the small things that come across you? How am I reacting to the little inconveniences that come across me? Not everything is a mountaintop experience or a valley experience. Sometimes we're just in the middle. There has to be a journey. You're not always at the top or the bottom. Our lives are more than just this. How do you think you got to the mountaintop? How do you think you got to the valley? Were you transported there? You had to walk up the mountain daily and consistently, even having to deal with bitter water along the way. Faith in God is more than just enjoying the beautiful mountaintop view. It's more than getting into his presence when you're in the valley and crying out to the Lord. It's a still daily consistent walk. It's a still daily consistent faith in the Lord, that while I may not be in church right now and I may be dealing with the things of this world and it may be a while since I've really seen God do something, I will maintain faith that he's still the God who crashed the Red Sea, who brought the plagues on Egypt. He is still the God leading me with a pillar by day and lightning by night. He is still God, even in the mundane, everyday experiences of my life. Sometimes it's more than just being at the top of the bottom. Sometimes it's just about following the journey. Sometimes it's God calling us to do what we least want to do in order to reveal our true self, to reveal what's really in our heart. What's in my heart tonight? What's in your heart tonight? When God is looking down on me tonight when I go to bed, or tomorrow when I go to bed, or maybe even the next day, what is he seeing? Is he seeing a gradual slip away that peaks at the mountaintop every church service and dims at the valley a few days later? Lord, I pray that when you look upon my heart, when you look in my life, that you would see a burning love that hasn't been quenched by bitter waters of this world. Smooth water never made a skilled sailor, and an easy life never made a strong Christian. If we want to be used of God and grow in the Lord, then we have to be prepared to deal with things that we don't want to. We continue on our journey. We continue walking with the Israelites, and we've got our water, everything's good. but suddenly our stomachs begin to grumble. Can't just have water, got to have something to eat. Lord forbid we go a day without eating. Time goes on, the people begin complaining again, and they even begin to say, oh, how we long for the days of Egypt. We may have been slaves, but we had a full belly. I would rather go back to my death in Egypt than be out here in freedom. It's not as comfortable out here. At least the Egyptians gave us food. At least we knew every day where our food was coming from. I didn't have to trust some giant cloud to give me my food. I got to trust the people who, while they treated me poorly, at least they gave me my minimum requirements. The story goes on, and the Lord makes one of my personal dreams come true and causes manna, aka free delicious food, to fall from heaven for free. You just have to go pick it up. Excluding on the Sabbath day, the rules for the manna were very simple. Get how much you and your family needed to eat for that day, and don't get any more. It was not a long list of rules. It made the 10 Commandments look long-winded. It was very short and simple. Don't get more than you need. The lesson that can be learned from this is that God has called us to get what we need from him, and to also remember that if you got too much manna, when you woke up the next day, the manna that you tried to save was spoiled. It had gone bad. You could only get enough manna for that day because God wanted to make sure that day after day after day, you had to keep and maintain faith in him. Otherwise, you weren't getting fed that day. What can be learned from this is God has called us to daily communion with him, to a daily relationship, not I'm going to get all my food and I'm going to get all my relationship with you on this day, and then tomorrow I've got enough saved over. I'm meal prep for the week. I don't have to pray. I don't have to pray now. I did enough of that the other day. I don't have to. I read all my scriptures in one day for the whole week, so now I don't need to do that anymore. I'm ahead on my Bible reading. I can take it easy today. It's about daily relationship. It's a daily walk with God. The Lord is the bread of life. His word and prayer is our daily bread. We can't just live off Sunday's portion or Wednesday's portion. It has to be daily. We go out, spend the effort, and collect our source of life for the day. If we don't go get the food, we die. If we don't get to the source of life every day, we slowly begin to die. I cannot allow myself to be cut off from the daily communion. I cannot allow myself to be cut off from the tree. I can't be the branch that's cut off, because when the branch is cut off, it withers and dies. If we lose our relationship with God, we lose our faith. If we lose our prayer life, we lose our connection with the supernatural and with the one who gave literally everything to us. Daily prayer and Bible reading is our daily manna from heaven. It didn't stop in the Old Testament. It didn't stop when they got to the promised land. The manna from heaven daily that can restore us, keep us going to where we need to go, our promised land, heaven, is daily prayer and Bible reading. That is the thing that will keep us and maintain us to the promised land, because if we don't maintain as simple a thing as prayer and Bible reading, we will not make it to where God has us to go. We're not making it to the promised land if we don't maintain the manna, if we don't keep going out and seeking the daily bread that God has given to us. It brings us closer to God. This daily task is about sacrificing our current self for our future self. We're sacrificing what we want for what the future us needs. It's not about what current Grant wants. It's about what Grant needs in the future. Because what Grant needs in the future is going to be much more important than what Grant needs right now, because I'm not going to be able to get to that point if I don't sustain myself past this point. Sacrificing what I want for what my spirit needs. It's what I want for what my spirit needs. It's not what I need for what my spirit wants. It's what I want selfishly for what my spirit needs to sustain itself. What it has to have, or it will die. It's about who do I want to be? How do I want to have spent my time on this earth when I go before God? It doesn't matter how much manna we collect daily. It doesn't matter how much we get in that one sitting, because it's not transferring to the next day. You can't pray all the hours for your entire life on one day and then live the rest of your life and you're set to go till you die and go to heaven. It doesn't work that way. God made us for communion daily. And I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but if I've taught the youth anything, it's got to be repetitive sometimes. If I've learned anything. An example of this is if you think back to the time of the original disciples. They daily walked with Jesus. They didn't figuratively daily walk with Jesus. They literally walked with Jesus. He was right there. They could touch him. He was literally right there. Trying to make that point clear. Our world, the New Testament, and Christianity itself have been forever changed because these 11 people walked daily with God. Everything, the entire known timeline of the world has been changed because of 11 guys. They decided that they believed in what they had experienced. They had faith in who they spent time with, and they chose to abide in God and preach the good news. Without them, it would have probably been a different world. God would have still gotten his message across, absolutely. But because of these people, the word spread everywhere. They did it despite persecution, threats, and violence. They kept the faith and remembered all they had seen and proclaimed the name of the Lord to everybody that they came across. Even their shadows could heal people because of the amount of time that they had spent with God. The Lord tonight is calling us, just like he did the disciples, to be one with him. I recently learned more about fusion. And fusion, for those who don't know, is a process of two or more separate things becoming one. These two or more separate things are distinct. They are their own thing. They are separate. They weren't split in half and now they're coming back together again. They're completely different. Fusion is those different things now becoming a new single entity. Fusion is the reaction that powers the sun and the stars. Fusion is the thing that is the most significant source of energy in the entire universe, and it is powered by two things becoming one thing. Jesus came to this earth and died on a cross for us so that we could become one with him. He came and died on a cross so that we could daily die to ourselves and become one with him. We're not just called to follow after God. We're not just called to chase after him, but we're called to be one with our Creator. We are called to be one with God. We're called to fuse together with the Spirit of God in our life and become a completely new thing and become a light and an energy source that this world has never seen before. Why don't we give the Lord a hand clap of praise in this house? Lord, I love you, Jesus. You are so good, God. As the Israelites' journey continues, God continues to do not just ordinary things, miraculous things. Things that if it wasn't God, they're not happening. They see water come from a rock. Because of God, Israel defeats Amalek, which is an enemy, and time literally stands still. If this battle hadn't happened, we would be a few hours ahead of where we are right now. Unfortunately, you would already be home, probably asleep, enjoying your time off. But because God chose to make time stand still, we're here right now. They received the 10 Commandments, literally written by God himself, and then broken, and then rewritten again, but Moses had to do it this time. And lastly, the journey to the promised land ended with 12 infamous spies, or 10 infamous spies and 2 not infamous spies. Numbers 13 and 30 through 33 says, "And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, 'Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it.' But the men that went up with him said, 'We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we.' And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, 'The land, though which we had gone to search it, is a land that eaten up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers.'" Israel, did you forget what you had for breakfast? Did you forget the manna from heaven? Did you forget time literally standing still, water coming from a rock, the Red Sea waters parting, the plagues of Egypt? These aren't descendants of the people who saw that happen. These are the people that saw that happen. These are the people who just that day ate manna from heaven and saw the cloud of God before them and saw the lightning the night before, suddenly saying, I don't know if God can handle that. They must have forgotten what they had for breakfast that morning. They must have forgotten if it wasn't for God in the first place, they'd have died a long time ago. God has done all these amazing, miraculous things, and for some reason, his people are still doubting him. Doubt is the enemy of faith. Doubt is the enemy of God, and doubt is the enemy of what God can actually do. When we doubt, God does what we think he's gonna do. He does what we think he's capable of when we doubt. Because we decide to put limits on him. We decide to put God in a box and make him small and put him on our table and say, you stay right there. Don't get too crazy. Don't make me uncomfortable. Don't make me have to stretch my faith and believe a little above what makes me comfortable. Doubt is like a person making stew. And after they add meat, potatoes, the seasonings, everything's going good, suddenly they decide to add just a pinch of arsenic to the recipe. At that point, all the things that were good don't matter, because all the things that are good will now kill you because doubt has been thrown in. Unfortunately, we know what God can do. The enemy knows what God can do. We know what God can do, and God definitely knows what God can do, but for some reason, we doubt. We doubt that God can or will do the miraculous. We doubt that God not only can deliver us from our enemies, but also deliver our enemies into our hand. We doubt God while he looks at us and says, did you forget what you had for breakfast? We stand and doubt God on what he can do, all the while the enemy he delivered into our hands is literally shaking in fear. How is it that the enemy knows their days are numbered, and we, the chosen people, decide to sit back doubting God and saying, I don't think you can handle that. Let's just sit back. We're grasshoppers compared to what you want us to do. The enemy knows their days are numbered, and so they make sure that we're doubting God, so they can have an easier time at it. It can be hard to follow and trust Jesus sometimes. We're told to pick up our cross and follow him, but it seems like he never does tell us where we're going. He doesn't give us a map beforehand. He doesn't send us a GPS. He doesn't give us the destination. He says, just go, follow me. How many hills? How tall are the hills? How low are the valleys? God, why aren't you telling me these things? That kind of worries me. That makes me unsettled a little bit. Sometimes it feels like we're going in circles in the woods, and you just know that you've passed that tree 3 or 4 times. God, stop, ask for directions. We're going in circles. We've been here before. We've gone through this already. This is old news. You're lost, God. You obviously couldn't have handled yourself. That's what we do when we doubt God. It can be hard, but he doesn't need directions. It can be hard, but we don't need to ask for directions. If I'm with him, I don't need a time estimate. I don't need to say, God, are we there yet? How long is this journey gonna take? I'm getting bored in the back. I just have to know that deep down, I may not have all the answers, but he definitely does. If I can just keep my eyes locked in on him, everything's gonna be okay. If I can just make sure that I've got faith in God, I won't waver. If I stay strong in the faith, if I trust in God, and suddenly a city of Jericho comes on my path, the walls have already fallen. The people in the walls are shaking in fear. All I have to do is have faith, press on, remember what I had for breakfast that morning, and God's gonna go ahead and knock those walls down for me so that I can keep going to the promised land that God's called me to. Lord, because you've done so much for me, I cannot tell it all. Because you've done so much for me, if you never do another thing for me, Everything you've already done is plenty. Because he's done so much for me, I can't just stand still and be quiet about it. Because he's done so much for me, sometimes I just can't keep my mouth shut. I've got to get a little bit loud about it. I don't care if I lose my voice talking about him. I don't care if I'm uncomfortable. Because he's done so much for me, I can't keep still. Because he's done so much for me, I will keep the faith even when drinking bitter water. I'm holding on to faith that we will have so many people in this church that you physically won't be able to get to the altar. There will have to be pockets of prayer happening in the back, in the sides, maybe in the foyer, that you won't be able to get here because there's so many people seeking the Lord. Is that too much for my God? There is nothing too much for him. There's nothing that I've come across or ever could come across that's too much for him. If you literally believe the Bible, if you literally believe what is written, how can he make everything in 6 days and you're stressed about the little things that we come across? How am I stressed about bitter water when he handled everything in 6 days and took an off day afterwards? How am I wondering how he's going to grow this church if he handled everything before I was even here? If God is for us, who can be against us? It just comes down to faith. The scripture says, wherefore, if God so clothed the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? If the musicians could come. God's been so good to me in my life, and he's given me many opportunities to travel. But unfortunately, because I'm me, I always forget something. My wife messes with me about it. Because I'm me, every time I get to where I'm going and I get to the hotel, I always seem to forget something. And unfortunately, one time, that thing was shampoo. Because I'm not a fan of a week long of greasy hair, I had to obviously go get some shampoo, but I didn't have time. I had to get to where I was going, and I needed to quickly take a shower from the day that had gone by. And lo and behold, there was a bottle of shampoo in there from the hotel, just waiting on me. So obviously, not to be a stingy person, I happily accepted the bottle of shampoo. That little bottle, just enough for that one shower, got me through, got me where I needed to go. And then I went on my way. And once again, because I'm me, I never did go buy that shampoo. But something funny happened the next day when I went to take another shower. There was another bottle of shampoo in there. And the same thing for the next day. And I figured I've only got 2 more days here. I might as well just do a little experiment and see if it just keeps showing up. And lo and behold, it just kept showing up. Not enough shampoo to get me through the week, but just enough for that day. And then the next day, just enough for that day. God's given me exactly what I need for today. I just have to trust in him that he will do the same the next day. God's word says we walk by faith, not by sight. I can't currently see that small bottle of shampoo I hope is in my shower the next day, but I'm going to go ahead and believe that it'll be there. I'm going to maintain faith that what I need the next day is going to be there. I can't see every little thing God is doing for me. I couldn't possibly know everything he's done for me, but I'm going to go ahead and have faith that he's already worked it out for my good. That he's going to go ahead, if he kept me today, that he might just go ahead and keep me tomorrow. That he's got some things working on the back burner that I don't know about and taking care of my problems. Whether it be sweet water or bitter water, I will trust that if God put it in my path, it's working for my good. If we could all stand. I've asked these men to please help me out a little bit tonight. I want to do an object lesson. I'm going to start over here. These are no longer people. These are the living embodiment of faith. I have 4 living embodiments of faith. I'm starting right here. This is my faith today. I've got faith right now. This is going to get me through what I need today. But tomorrow's coming. So I'm going to go ahead the next day and reach out to that faith that's going to get me through that next day. I don't have this faith right now. And this faith may have gotten me to where I am right now, and it may have been good enough for yesterday, but tomorrow I'm going to need this faith. Because this faith may be different than that faith. So I'm gonna latch on and reach for the faith the next day. And so I'm at today. But that faith isn't as close as that faith. This might be a little bit harder to get. It's a little bit harder to get to that faith. I have to stretch a little bit. I may have to get a little bit uncomfortable. But if I just reach far enough, I can get to this faith. And oh, look at that. The next faith isn't quite as far as the other one. I don't have to stretch as far to get to this one. I don't have to reach and pull and fight to get to that next little bit of faith. Because not every day is a battle. Not every day is the valley. Not every day is the mountain. It's about staying on the path. It's about keeping the faith day after day after day after day. The Lord has already given us all the faith we need to get where we're going, or to get us to where He needs us to be. It's just that sometimes we have to stretch. It's not always as simple as going from that faith to that faith. Sometimes I've got to stretch and push myself and get uncomfortable to get to that faith. We say, but God, I'm too small. I'm like a grasshopper in the eyes of the Canaanites. Well, why don't you stretch your faith a little bit? Why don't you see if I'll just go ahead and come through for you one more time? God, I'm not qualified for this job. I'm not as good as the other people who may have applied. Or I'm not as spiritual as other people in the church. Who am I to be here? I'm not as good of a preacher as all the other ministers in this church. Who am I to be up here speaking? And God says, why don't you just stretch your faith a little bit and see if I don't just make you qualified? God, I don't have a lot of money to give for the sacrificial offering. I'm not going to make a dent in what needs to be done. What can my offering possibly do for this church? God, our church is too small. We're not as big, or we're not as centrally located as some of the other churches. God, I'm not talented enough. I'm just a one-talent individual. I don't have 5 talents like those other people. God, my parents didn't raise me in this. It's not as easy for me. We make all these excuses, all the while God's just looking down at us saying, did you forget what you had for breakfast this morning? Son, did you miss when I parted the Red Sea? Daughter, did you forget when I made your bitter water sweet? Did you forget who placed the stars in the sky? Did you forget who controls not only the wind but the waves? Did you forget that when you were in the fire, that you were in the furnace, I was there with you? And that when you came out, you didn't even smell like smoke. No one could have even told what you have been through had you not testified about it. It's about keeping the faith through the bad times. All it takes, church, is faith and mountains move. All it takes is trusting God and putting our faith into action. Faith is not an adjective. Faith is an action. It is a verb. You physically have to go from one faith to the next faith. And when that's no longer enough, you may have to stretch a little bit farther to get to the next one. But if you just keep going, God's going to keep you. Through the valleys, when things are hard, it's about using the faith and keeping the faith. God has given us and allowed us to be so kept by Him and so honored that we get the opportunity to stretch and get uncomfortable. I close with this. One day, I was listening to a lesson. Y'all are welcome to go down. I was listening to a lesson by a man named Brother Lee Stone King, and he began to teach about not just the rapture, and I do not like talking about the rapture. It just makes me uncomfortable every time. Pastor knows that. But everything after the rapture, the 1,000 years of peace, the white throne judgment, everything. And it a little bit of that caught my attention because it was weird. He began to talk about how at the white throne judgment, the wicked will come before the Lord. And they'll begin to make excuses for why they couldn't stay in the faith. God, my family wasn't in the faith. God, I lost my job and I felt like I couldn't trust you anymore. Why would you let that happen to me? That's not fair. Other people didn't have to go through that. Other people didn't have to go through the family that I had, God. That's not fair. I should get into heaven. Other people didn't deal with that. The wicked will come before God and make their excuses. And then God, as God does, will call out a saint who had the same situation but still lived for God. They had the exact same situation and set of circumstances, but they kept the faith. Day after day after day. When they had to stretch and get out of what was comfortable for them, they did it. Something that can be learned from this is that there is someone out there who is going through exactly what you're going through right now. But one of you will be the one who God calls out, and one of you will be the one being judged by God. The Bible talks about two in the field and one in the bed, or two in the bed, two in the field, one being cast away. There's another person going through your circumstances. There's another person going through your situations. But which one of the two are you going to be? God has already said that there will be a saint who endures and a sinner who is judged and cast down, each having gone through the same things. Which one, which side of God will I find myself on? Will I be with those who got distracted by the things of the world? Those who lost the faith? Or will I find myself on the side of God saying, lo, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, though everything wasn't comfortable, though I had to drink some bitter water, He always kept me. I never lost the faith. I trusted in Him. I never forgot who I was and that God is greater, that the one who is in me is greater than he who is in the world. Tonight I invite you to come to this altar and just spend a little time talking with God. I'm not asking you to go to the mountaintop. I'm not asking you to go endure the valley. I'm asking you to pray that God would sustain you on the journey, that He would keep you day after day after day from one faith to the next faith, that He would give you that little bottle of shampoo day after day, and that you would find continually that God has been faithful to you.